There was an elderly woman with Down syndrome in the same hospital room as my grandma after she fell and broke her pelvis bone. She couldn't speak English that well as she was very old and sick, but she kept complaining that her leg was hurting and would repeat that and then begin to whimper. It looked as if she was going to cry, so I went over to her and gave her a hug. A huge smile spread across her face, and then I drew her a picture of a dog. For a few moments she forgot about all of her pain and loneliness. Brought my mom to tears. Edit. A word. Once I found a girl curled into a ball in the subway stairs. She had been having coffee with her friend, and in the time she had reached the station she got a call that her friend had been hit by a car and died. She was in shock. I stayed with her for half an hour, simply being there so she wasn't alone, until she recovered enough to go on her way. We've never met again. Of course, this is a huge city. Someone dropped their lotto ticket and I returned it to them. They won $400 and gave me half. I came home late on a delayed flight and there was an old woman sobbing at the bus depot because no one was there to take her home. This was in the middle of a bad snowstorm at 1 a.m. so no one wanted to drive. I picked her up and drove out of my way to drop her off. Had to drive an extra half hour in the worst conditions ever, but it all worked out. Knew someone at school who was raised by a single parent. Said parent develops cancer and my friend, who had been obviously depending on her, became utterly depressed. Couldn't cook meals, finish schoolwork, do sport. Most of his time was dedicated to his parent. I cooked, bought meals for him, helped him catch up all his missed classes, organized stuff to get him outside, etc. He's doing better now. So is his mom. Although we don't talk anymore, still felt worthwhile. Riding on my bike, saw a man lying on his back in the middle of an adjacent sidewalk. While it's fairly common around here to find homeless people passed out in doorways and whatnot, and therefore relatively easy to ignore, this guy was different. Nicely dressed, clean, not obviously homeless, and really still. Nobody was stopping. It was in broad daylight. I got off my bike and checked on him. His eyes were rolled back in his head, then would randomly roll around. His pulse was weak and slow. He was breathing, but very slowly and shallowly. Once I stopped, people started getting interested. But when I asked someone to call 911, everyone took off. I called them myself, and they wanted me to do CPR. I only had one functioning arm, so I again asked for help. All the rubberneckers again disappeared. Fortunately, an ambulance arrived quickly. I still don't know what happened to him, but I hope he was okay. I also called 911 for a guy that was obviously homeless and drunk at night in a mostly deserted area, because he was passed out face down on a sidewalk with a nearly empty bottle of bourbon in his hand, and a growing puddle of blood stemming from where he slammed his head when he fell down. I would rather risk some personal safety than wonder if another human bled out because I didn't want to be bothered. Yes, I understand not stopping to help a guy in a van on the side of a deserted road in the middle of the night, or another dozen other scenarios. Get somewhere safe and call the police. But I'm baffled as to how people can just flow around a person in need in broad daylight in a well-populated area. Donating half my liver. An acquaintance talked about suicidal thoughts over several weeks online. One day he said goodbye forever and left all groups. I found his address and sent an ambulance there. He's feeling better now, and thanked me a few days afterwards. This one sticks out. I was at a gas station roughly 11 p.m. on a weeknight. The young girl in front of me has the counter filled with junk food and soda. Basically the garbage to keep you going on a long night. Anyways, her card was declined and she seemed very upset. Keep in mind, while upset, she was never rude or anything, just annoyed. I walked to my car with my stuff after I paid while she sorted out her card issue. I then noticed the only other car in the station is filled to the brim with clothes, belongings, It then clicks in my head, this girl is down on luck. I walk back in the store and bump into her at the door. I tell her if she wants, I'll gladly buy all the things for her and anything else she needs. She gave me this odd look and agreed. I'm probably 24 years old at the time. After helping her carry the stuff to her car, she looked at me with the saddest face and asked, "Why did you do that?" I smiled at her and said, "You were in the store buying all the foods I would be buying in a similar situation. So I figured you were normal. Now if you were buying the bananas and old fruit, I would have been more skeptical." We had a short laugh about it and we went our separate ways. Always wondered how things turned out for her. I cut the lady's lawn next door for free because she's old. This happened about 10 years ago. I had an early childhood education class in college that involved observing, interacting with preschoolers. The college has a daycare for locals and teachers. One day we all decided to take the kids to a nearby park. This park was pretty secure, but there was a very busy road right next to it, and there were gaps in the fences. One of the kids' moms decided to come early to pick up her son. She parked on the other side of the street and was waiting to cross. The kids saw her and basically immediately started running and climbed through the fence and was going into the street. I noticed and ran as fast as I have ever in my life, leapt over the fence. It was only about 3 feet, and grabbed the boy literally a split second before a huge flatbed truck zoomed past going at least 65 plus mph. I looked up and saw the mom and tears were pouring from her eyes and she was screaming, because from her perspective all she could see would definitely give the impression her son was hit. So she runs over and I just hand her the boy and she's in total panic and terror. The instructor gets over and tells me thank you and says we are never coming to this park ever again, and she holds the mom as she's crying. I just stand there in shock. She took the kid home. We all walked the kids back to class. TLDR. I saved a 3-year-old boy's life. An old buddy of mine was having trouble with his graphic design homework and I was a year ahead of him in university. So he comes to me asking for help because he knows he isn't that good. I proceed to go to his room and sit there for a solid 6 hours helping him understand fundamentals, learn hotkeys, and answer any of his questions. The next day he says he is now passing and his teacher is proud of how much he has improved. He gives me a burrito and we call it even. Befriended someone so they wouldn't commit suicide. A year later and we're still good friends. My boyfriend never thought his birthdays were a special thing. For his birthday I contacted all of his friends weeks in advance and asked them to send a short video of them wishing him a happy birthday, as some of them are abroad. I then made a compilation video of these as well as pictures of him growing up just to show him how special he is to everyone around him, especially me, and how much he has impacted my life and so many others in such a positive way. I showed him this after I took him on a limousine ride to the Shard in London and gifted him a star in our names at the top of the building. He's done so much for me. I wanted his day to be just as special as he makes every day for me. I bought a single mom a bunch of stuff she couldn't afford to get her children off of her Amazon wishlist anonymously. I was walking down the street yesterday and someone's garbage can got flipped over because it was windy, so I picked it all up for them. There was quite a bit of trash laid out over their lawn and I assumed they weren't home. It's probably not the nicest thing I've done, but it's the one that came to mind first due to its recency. I've bought groceries and school supplies for several families in the area that obviously needed the help, but didn't have the ability to ask or were just unable to. One that sticks out in my head the most was a young woman who was trying to buy both during a tax holiday we have here in Alabama. She was in front of me at Walmart, and just flat out couldn't cover all that she needed. So she started putting stuff back. Her daughter crying over crayons was what broke me. Little girl wanted the big box, and her mom was putting it back. I said excuse me, walked past her and put my card in the reader. No kid should ever have to cry over the big box of crayons. Bought some random person a train ticket when the train was about to leave in 2 minutes and he didn't have enough change on him. He had a credit card, but the machine did not accept it. I don't know if it's the nicest thing, but a friend of mine was having a bad day, so I surprised her with mozzarella sticks when I saw her. That night, she cried. She taking the blame for something my friend did so he wouldn't get expelled. This kid showed up to track every day and ran in the February cold in a t-shirt and shorts, so I gave him a hoodie and still see him wearing it all the time. Bought a car for an employee. F28 was the GM at a pub a few years ago. Had an amazing waitress. F24, single mother with one more on the way. She had no personal transportation in a city with notoriously bad public transit. Still somehow made it to work each day, even if it meant walking her pregnant self 5 miles. She was always stressed about trying to provide for her kids, but was still professional and hardworking. My tax return was pretty good that year, and a friend happened to be selling a reliable older car for a reasonable price. I moved not long after that, but she found me on social media years later to thank me and explain that she was in a good place now and would like to repay me. I turned her down, seeing her success was 100% worth the cost of the car. I helped a waitress at a restaurant I frequent. After a few months of patronage, I knew most of the staff and was on a first-name basis with the monsieur. I learned that she was working 6 days per week, 8 to 10 hours per day, and going to school full-time, 5 days per week, 6 hours per day. Plus she traveled by bus between 2 and 3 hours per day. A quick bit of mental math. On a bad day she could spend 19 hours with her obligations, not counting bathing, eating, or homework. And after she paid for her tuition, she only had 10% of her paycheck left over. As I have no family nor children of my own, I decided to pay for her university. She has since quit her job and is focusing on her studies. She regularly sends me updates about her classes and I'm happy to report she's getting straight A's as a psychology major. A friend I went to high school with is an elementary school teacher at a school without a lot of money. She did one of those GoFundMe but for teachers things. I can't remember the site exactly or what the project was, something tech related. She posted it on Facebook and there was a decent amount of sharing and stuff. But outside of a few $25 minus 50 donations, there wasn't a lot of actual activity. A month or two goes by and I check up on it again. It's only like halfway to the goal with a few weeks to spare. I finished it out and paid for the rest of it. I want to say it was $300 or something like that. Never told anyone I know about it. Left it anonymous on the donation too. This is actually the first time I've mentioned it to anyone at all. Just felt good. I met a girl on MySpace. This was back in the day, when I was just randomly messaging people that looked interesting. Over the course of 3 days realized she was very suicidal. She had a plan of when and how she would kill herself that evening, and the method was lethal. I worked as a counselor at the time, so I knew this was incredibly serious. She had written me earlier in the day about her plan. When I saw the messages a few hours later and responded, she did not respond and I freaked out. All I knew was her name and the city she lived in. So I called the police there and they were able to track her throughout her IP address. While all of this was playing out, it was the longest 2 hours of my life. They got to her house in time and she was taken to a psychiatric hospital. The police called me to tell me that she was okay and later on her mom called me crying and thanking me. The girl called me after she got out of the hospital and thanked me. She asked me why I cared so much to go through all that to keep her from committing suicide and I was taken aback. I told her she was a person and even though I didn't know her very well, I certainly didn't want her to die and I cared about her. We've hung out a few times and we're still friends on social media. Her life has had ups and downs. But man, I'm so glad she's alive to experience it all. I have no doubt she would be dead if I hadn't been randomly messaging people on MySpace for anyone that does not know regarding suicide. When the person has a timeline of when they want to do it, it's serious. When they have a plan of how they would do it and the plan is feasible, it's serious. When the method they are selecting is lethal, it's serious. They need professional help if they are at those points, and having all three means they need intervention ASAP. Gave my stepsister a car when she had a baby and lived far from town. I talked to a friend who wanted to kill himself. His family was trash and didn't even try to prevent it. Some of his other friends condoned it and one even tried to help. Apparently, I was the only person who told him that it was a mistake. Eventually, he got throughout his troubles, graduated college shortly after, and now lives with his amazing fiancée. It can get better. Folks, I can think of very few situations where suicide is the answer. After spending much of my 20s asking my dad for financial help, I was finally able to return the favor. Dad hit hard times, and while I wasn't in great shape either, I paid his mortgage for the month. Another time, I reconnected with my high school best friend, and he wasn't doing too well. Divorce. Lost his job. He didn't ask, but I sent him $100 as a gift to help him power through. Maybe I got played, but he wasn't the type before, so I doubt it. I don't have many friends, and the ones I do have tend to have the kind of problems I can't physically do anything about. But I help when I can. I don't believe in saying no when someone needs help I can afford to give. I'm no saint either, but at least I know I'm not a total slong. After this girl in 3rd or 4th grade had bullied me for months, I found her crying in the back of the bus. I asked her what was wrong and she denied telling me. I spoke to her friends and they said she wouldn't tell them either, so I went and managed to get her to tell me what was wrong. It turned out her father had been molesting her and he had just been sentenced to prison. I sat there the rest of the bus ride and talked to her about it and helped her calm down a bit. I know that must have extremely traumatic, and I hope her life is better. I was sitting on a bench on football field all alone. It wasn't even a game on, no one around. No wonder. It was still 6 a.m. A random older guy came to me while he was walking his dogs. He was swearing and shouting at me that I have nothing to do there, even that it was public place. He yelled that I just leave garbage around while showing me the garbage on the ground. Of course I didn't do anything like that. I was just harmlessly sitting there minding my own business. He kicked me out of there, and there left. I was angry because he kicked me out of public place, but also felt sorry because the field was quite big and there was a lot of garbage. When I made sure he wasn't around, I sneaked there and cleaned the whole place while he was gone. I wasn't there from that day. I hope he was happy that he didn't have to deal with that garbage himself. I try to do a lot of nice things when no one is looking. It helps me sleep at night. I held my landlord while she cried herself to sleep because her husband left her. I held my best friend's brother as his grandmother took her last breath, rubbing his back and telling him she's in a better place now. Bought several coworkers, friends and strangers groceries when they've been struggling paycheck to paycheck. Someone did that for me once and it meant the world, not needing to go hungry until payday. Took 3 separate people into my home when they were struggling, mentally, emotionally or financially, so they could get on their feet again. 1 divorce, 1 lost their job, and 1 was getting clean of drugs. 2 of the 3 turned it around and are doing really well. I've given what I could spare, food or otherwise, to homeless people, but 1 in particular that stands out. Turns out the guy ran out of gas and was stranded for the better part of a day. Pretty much cried when I offered to buy him some gas. I was sitting in a road construction halt, literally in the middle of nowhere, 4 hours from any city, and I saw an old man hitchhiking. For some reason I had this feeling that I needed to help him. I've never picked up a hitchhiker before, The man was fleeing a fire that destroyed his home, slept on the side of the road, and had gone an entire day without water. He was in bad shape. He also grew weed to give to nuns, and they turned it into CBD for cancer patients. I find that it's the little things we can do when someone is in need. But what I've done for people has been done for me 10 times over by strangers. Today you, tomorrow me. For my best friend's 30th birthday, I wanted to give him something awesome because he's been amazing, supportive, and such a positive influence in my life. I wanted something meaningful to show just how much I appreciate him this year. He's really big into vinyl records. So I decided to have a record made of some of our recordings from when we were in a band together in high school. The front of the album was this really cool picture of our band's name I had painted on my parents' garage that we used as a band picture for this small street festival we played at. The back of the record was a black and white picture of the basement where we used to practice. I took that picture when our friend's parents, he was the drummer, sold the house and we were helping them move stuff out of it. The recordings I chose were from this practice session that I call Good Friday because we did it on a Good Friday we head off of school. It's not the greatest sounding recording we ever did. We used a boombox to record our stuff. But that day we ended writing and recording a song all three of us really liked within the span of like a couple of hours. We were never really great or played many shows. But the time we spent practicing and goofing off in that basement and going to the diner or the Mexican restaurant for tacos afterward are some of the happiest memories I have from high school. Here's a picture from when I gave it to him this year. https://iMager.com/lsvk8c.jpg. I don't think I will ever be able to top that gift. But it meant so much to me to see how happy it made him this year. Against better judgment, I allowed my brother to move into my new home with me and my wife in 2009 after he had just lost his job. Unfortunately for me, he was a way worse drug addict and thief than I realized, and it took a huge financial blow to me, having to replace stuff I had before. I realized after that I became more jaded and came up with a set of rules about who I will help and when. It made me far more resilient to trusting people, which has helped me avoid the pitfalls of common scams and schemes. It was a great learning experience.